Hey there! Today we're going to talk about a subject near and dear to my heart, and that's dating, specifically first dates. I was married from 1994 in my relatively early 20s all the way to 2014, a 20-year marriage that I consider to be very successful. But alas, I was back to divorced and back to dating in January of 2015. And of course, everything leading up to that, that's a story for another time. I'm trying to get this initial video down to 19 minutes. So I didn't know if anyone would want me at all at age 45. I thought maybe it was going to be like the Chinese buffet, lunch buffet at 3 p.m., pretty well picked over. And much to my pleasant surprise, I found out that definitely wasn't the case. And I really had an amazing, life-changing time out there again. I went on 127 first dates, and it was a life-changing experience, really amazing. I could quite easily write an entire book on it, talk for many, many hours, maybe 10 hours on it. So my first date, let's call her Roxanne. I found her on Craigslist. Now, before we jump to conclusions, I lived in San Francisco around the turn of the millennium, and Craigslist was where you went to get anything done. And I mean, if you needed anything, you could go to Craigslist. And this was before they shut down the personal section. And it was crazy on Craigslist personals in San Francisco 23 years ago. My then wife and I, we used to go on just to get a discussion going, and frankly, to be a little entertained by these absolutely imaginative ads. But anyway, I was back there again. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I managed to rustle up a first date, and we went out to, so Roxanne had dark hair, pixie cut, black eyes. She wore this fuzzy white sweater. It was really amazing that this beautiful, educated, intelligent woman would dress up for me and go out with me, and I thought that was just the absolute coolest. And of course, I didn't really know as much about what was going on. So anyway, she owned a cleaning business, and we had an absolutely lovely evening. We went to a place in downtown Salt Lake called Martine, and this place had high-backed booths, and was just, it was a lot of hardwood. And I knew the chef, and he made a lot of great, like, he changed up the menu. He really loved what he's doing. It wasn't a chain. It was really something special. It was very private. It was quiet. So my first bit of advice, if you're back dating in your middle ages, is to find a couple of places that are good places to go. And middle of the road with something interesting on the menu. And if you go there many times, of course, you'll be able to talk intelligently about the food and maybe a little bit about the place itself. And that is meaningful. And that's the second thing, would be go on, like, you don't know if you're going to be with this person for maybe for 50 years. So you want that first date to be real special. Don't skimp on the first date and be like, well, we'll just get coffee because I gotta talk to 8 people and just get them out the door and rate them real quick. It's like, well, do you really want that to be your story of how you met? Of course, the story would be, well, we met on Craigslist. So really, I had a really good feeling because that was like a successful outing. And I was like, oh wow, maybe I'm not the dregs, the Chinese lunch buffet at 3 p.m. Did I say that already? By the way, I had to redo this video because the battery ran out. All right, so that was one. And then the next date I went on was, let's call her Rose. And this was a meaningful relationship. Oh, so with date number 1, that was it. Just a first date, nothing more. Now, the other thing was, so Rose, I met on Facebook. And by the way, Facebook, not a great place to meet women. Like, don't just go onto the messages and start doing that. But at the time, I was living alone in my studio, and I was on a lot of next level, like law of attraction type sites or pages, I guess, for Facebook. And it was I just somehow we started chatting, and it was pretty intense because she was looking for magic too. And we talked extensively every day, first through text, messaging, then through text, and then phone calls, and then we just, like, every day. And she sent me like a zillion pictures. Now, of course, I would be like a zillion times more cautious. I happened to get lucky this first time, guys. This is not a great way to go about it. This is a don't story. So, in terms of how it got started. So then we were like falling asleep with each other on the phone. So my advice here would be watch out for catfishes, because you can't believe everything that you see on the internet. And it's very, very, very common that it's just pictures, and that person's not really a real person. It's not who they say they are. They're looking for something else. Typically it's money. And there are people that actually make their livings off of making unfounded emotional relationships with people and then somehow getting them to send money. And I imagine they have like 6 TV screens, or maybe they're just really fast on their phone, and they just have like maybe 20 or 50 guys just rolling at a time. But anyway, Rose was definitely real, and she lived one state over. And so basically she drove in. We had a wonderful weekend out on the town, going out to eat and doing a little shopping. And of course this was the dead of winter. And it was really cool, really meaningful. Ultimately, the distance killed the relationship. So that would be my next bit of wisdom would be don't do long distance, because that is, like, it's just a giant, massive strike against the relationship actually going somewhere. Because ultimately, if things progress, you've got to meet in person. You've got to be together and actually spend time together. And it can't just all be text and messaging and calls like that. My next date also turned into a relationship. Excuse me, albeit a relatively short-lived one. And that was with, let's call her Snow. So Snow was absolutely amazing. One of those relationships where I really, for many years, I looked back on it and was like, oh, if only. And she was from Thailand. Taiwan, that's it. There's a difference. So Taiwan, and she explained it to, she says, like a grain of rice, and she's like drawing the island where she lived. And she started, during the first date, she started drawing on my arm, like explaining her name and stuff like that. Now at the time I didn't know it, but she was marking me like territory. Or that's a form of intimacy to, I guess, to draw on someone or leave something with them or make some kind of mark on them. Obviously, as a man, I don't say, try to do that on your first date. Definitely don't do that on your first date. And in fact, while I'm thinking about it, the biggest skill that I would say for dating would be to read the room. And there's nothing for it but to actually get some practice, and maybe in some cases just ask, do you feel comfortable? How about this? How are you feeling about this? Things like that. And that, of course, is just plain courtesy. So, yeah, don't make it weird. So we went out quite a bit, spent a lot of time together, and obviously I'm not talking about physical relationships that might come about because of these dates. And so, but Snow and I went out quite a bit, and she started, I didn't realize it at the time, like looking back after all the experiences I've had, I look back and I go, oh, that's what's happening. She was actually rearranging her life a little bit so that we could be together. And her real concern was was having her heart broken. And that actually is, I think, a subtext with a lot of women, maybe people in general. And, well, and I'm only saying it from my perspective. So if I make more of these videos, I'll probably be like, oh, women that, women this. And, well, I mean that in the best possible sense. So anyway, didn't want to get her heart broken. She was expressing concerns about that. And ultimately, though, she got a better offer. I realize that now. Like, she called me up. She was like, hey, should we go away this weekend? Da-da-da. And of course, at the time, I was getting absolutely crushed in my business. Like, I was almost entirely laser focused on getting everything cleaned up. And so I couldn't do it. And so I think she went with someone else. She actually called me the day before Valentine's Day and was like, I think we should just be friends. You know, that thing. And I, of course, was quite despondent because I did have some local things planned. But, you know, there you go. So I had this big spray of flowers, nobody to give it to. That was Valentine's Day #1. And, you know, I thought, well, this is opening up. Maybe this will be energy to get something else going, or another door will open up, etc. And I had something else to say about that. So yeah, that was absolutely brutal. Now, a couple months before this, I had started making inroads on doing a relationship show. I really enjoyed my Blue Table Painting page. I was showing off all our projects, and you know, the rest is history. You guys know all about that. You're watching it on that very channel. And so I thought, wouldn't it be great if I just interviewed people about their relationships? Because, of course, I was very interested in that at the time. And so I interviewed these two young women, and they said, they looked at each other like, you know who he would be perfect for? Would be Mindy. And I was like, ooh, something's happening. And so they, right on the spot, they called her. They were like, Mindy, this is so-and-so and so-and-so. We met this guy. We think that you should consider going out with him. Is it all right if we give him your phone number? And she said yes. And of course, I called her, I think right away. I think it was like right on the spot. And I did know at the time that she had as her profession being an exotic dancer. Yes, exactly what you're thinking. And so I call her up, and I'm like, I'd like to take you for dinner. If you're amenable, let's set up a date and a time. And so I think I did actually say amenable. So, you know, you got to have your personal style when you're going about this stuff. So anyway, she said, well, why don't you just come out Tuesday and you can catch my show. And I said, I'm not interested in coming to your show. I'm interested in going out to dinner to see if maybe we could possibly develop a longer-term relationship. And she said, oh, awesome. Let's do that. So we set it up. We went out, I think, 2 or 3 times, and I blew it. It was so bad. It was cringeworthy, guys. The problem was she was obviously very attractive, and I just was sort of putting up a facade. I was being somebody I wasn't. And of course, she had the wisdom and skill to detect and unearth all that. And she was testing me too. I remember her saying, she was looking at my shirt. She's like, hey, are you gay? Because that shirt seems to indicate so. And you might think, well, that's kind of a rude thing to say. Well, it was teal. I was into teal at the time and still wore polo shirts. So, guys, on a first date or anything that's like worthwhile, I advise against wearing polo shirts, and certainly not in flamboyant colors. So at the time, I didn't really have the balance to, you know, roll with it or sort of poke fun at myself or come back with something. And so I just sort of mumbled and stumbled through it. It was cringeworthy. I really, I'm glad none of this is being recorded. Or everything's being recorded by hyperdimensional beings. Excuse me. All right. The fifth first date that I went out with, this, you can know the real name. Her name is Luli. She eventually, 4 years later, became my wife. And so Luli was absolutely amazing. So I met her on eHarmony. Oh, so I met Snow on eHarmony, Mindy through Reference. So after this, pretty much eHarmony and a really lesser known dating site called Zeus, which I love, and both of those have really served me well. So pick your dating site well would be my advice. Dating sites are great. They work really well. They serve a purpose in our society. Of course, you could use a matchmaker or just go and start doing activities and try and actually meet someone. But that's more difficult because, of course, you don't know, you know, she may be busy with other things in her life. And so, but, you know, back in the day, in the 90s, with my first wife, I met her at church. And the old-fashioned way, guys. And so there's that. So anyway, I met her on eHarmony. We talked by phone. I was like, she's really soft-spoken. She still lived with her dad. I was like, oh, is that like a guy that lives with his mother? Well, no, not really. But of course, at the time, I was a little inexperienced. So I was like, she made me drive to Salt Lake. She made me drive an hour to go to this Middle Eastern restaurant, which was fine. And so I went there, I expect to find kind of this mousy, trout-shouldered librarian in a gray sweater. So I got to this restaurant, which I thought would be like a Subway, you know, sort of slopped up like a cafeteria, but it wasn't. It was amazing. It was this magic place with all this Middle Eastern architecture and geometry, and it was just white tablecloths, and it was absolutely magic. So I go there, I'm looking around for her, and I'm looking around for her, and there's this gorgeous, like raven-haired, ruby-lipped model in a black dress just waving to me. And I was like, is the mousy librarian behind the supermodel? No, it was her. And it was magic, and we had great connection from the very beginning. We went on this long walk, and there was like this misty rain that came down, and I had an umbrella because I'm prepared. And it was and the street lamps made sort of that conical glow, and it was great. And of course, I learned at the time that a woman won't be like, hey, let's walk around the neighborhood unless she's into it too. So reading those signs, reading the room, that's a really important deal. Guys, I'm coming up on 19 minutes. That was my limit. I was hoping to cover so much more, so I'm going to make a separate video and talk about some subjects and some advice about it. And you should know that I am throwing my hat in the ring as a dating coach. And you can check the liner notes for rates and details on that. I don't need this, but you may need it. And my numbers are such that someone will be serious if they're going to go through with it. And I, of course, am definitely willing to meet with you for an initial consultation or getting to know you, because I am looking for a very small number of certain specific clients. And I absolutely know 100% that I can be of great use to somebody who's going through what I went through. All right, that is all. Thanks for tuning in.